Miss Brand from the Smithtown Library, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to make a snowflake lantern. The supplies you will need for this project are cardstock, a pencil, scissors, a glue stick, parchment paper, tape, optionally, a marker, and a hole punch. You will also need to cut out the template provided in the instructions, and of course you will need a battery-operated tea light. So let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do after I have cut out my template is I'm going to fold my piece of paper so I can create the lantern shape. So the way I want to do this is by folding my paper in thirds. So to fold your piece of paper in thirds, you're going to roll it up from the end. I'm doing this lengthwise. And normally if you wanted it to be in 3 equal parts, you would meet your edge of your roll to the edge of your paper. However, for this project, I want to leave just a little bit extra on my last third of my piece of paper so that I can have a tab to glue my lantern together. So I'm going to leave about a ½ inch extra at the edge there. And I'm just going to press down my fold, and I'm going to get a nice sharp crease on either side. So now you can see that I have this little bit of extra left, but when I unfold it, my piece of paper is in 3 parts. With this little extra here, I'm actually going to fold it up and over my fold to create almost like a little bit of an envelope. And this is going to be the tab that we glue to create our lantern shape. So once I have my paper folded, my next step is to trace my template onto my lantern. So I'm going to take my snowflake and I'm going to tape it somewhere on my lantern. I'm using the middle panel here. And you can put your snowflake wherever you'd like. I'm going to put mine right there. And I'm going to use just the tiniest bit of tape to secure it. I'm going to do 1 piece at the top and then 1 piece at the bottom. This is just so that my template doesn't move around while I'm tracing it. Then I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to trace a line around the edge of my template here. Okay, so once I've traced all the way around my snowflake, I'm going to remove my template. If you want, you can trace a second snowflake onto your lantern. If you want to do that, make sure you're really careful when you remove your snowflake so that you don't rip your template. I'm going to put that to the side, and I have a couple of gaps here. I'm just going to freehand those because I kind of know what the snowflake looks like. The gaps are just where the tape was, where I couldn't trace. So I'm just going to freehand those spots. And now I have my snowflake traced onto my cardstock. So my next step is to cut out my snowflake. So the way that I like to do this is I like to use my pencil to create a starting hole in my cardstock so that I can get the scissors inside the snowflake so I don't have to start at the edge. So very carefully I'm going to poke a hole through the center of my snowflake, being very careful not to accidentally stab my hand while I'm doing it. So I just take my pencil and I'm just going to poke it through, and then I like to make that hole just a little bit bigger. And there you go, I have my starting hole. So now I can use my scissors to start cutting out my snowflake. So once I'm done cutting out my snowflake, I'm ready to add any sort of embellishment. So in this one you can see I used a hole puncher to create sort of like smaller snowflakes. So the way I did that was I used my hole puncher towards the edge of my piece of paper. I punched out a couple holes just randomly here and there because snow kind of just falls wherever it wants to. So just a couple of holes at the top, a couple of holes at the bottom here. And then I also very carefully used the cutout of my snowflake to put some holes sort of closer to the edge of my snowflake so it looked a little bit more like it was in the design. If you do this, you have to be really careful not to accidentally rip one of the little tabs of your snowflakes. So just be gentle when you're doing this if you choose to use a hole puncher. So I'll just add a couple of little baby snowflakes here and there to sort of finish off my design. So once you're happy with your snowflake design, you can choose to add some lettering to the outside. So on this one, I wrote "Let It Snow." So I might do the same thing on this one. Add "Let It Snow. And you can color this however you like. I just like to add the words to it. And then the next part is you're going to cut a piece of parchment paper to fit over this panel of your lantern. So I'm going to first rip out a piece, and then I'm going to kind of cut it down to size so I can kind of see how much I need to take off. I'm just kind of eyeballing the measurements as I go, making sure that my parchment paper is going to cover all of the holes that I've made in my lantern. Yay. That looks pretty good. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my glue stick, and I'm actually going to glue all over this face of my lantern here so that I get a nice finish at the end, so that all of these pieces of my snowflake stick to my parchment paper. You don't need a ton of glue. I mostly focused my glue on the outside edge of the panel, and then on the little points of the snowflake here. And make sure you're gentle while you're doing this. You don't want to rip any parts of your design. And I'll add a little bit in the middle here. Then I'm going to take my piece of parchment paper and I am going to stick it to the front of my lantern. Once you've secured your parchment paper to your lantern, the last step is going to be to glue this tab so that you construct the lantern itself. So I'm just going to take a little bit of my glue stick here. I'm going to run it along this tab that we folded before. And then I'm going to press it to the opposite side. And you'll probably have to hold this for a minute or two so that the glue dries just a little bit. Make sure you get it nice and secure. You can kind of pinch it just a little bit. Make sure that it's glued down well. And then you have your lantern. The last thing that you need is an electronic tea light. Make sure that you're only using battery-operated tea lights with this project because it is paper, so a real candle will not be safe to use in this project. So you've got your battery-operated tea light, and there you go, your snowflake lantern. Thank you so much for joining me today. We hope to see you soon, but until then, visit the library's website at www.smithlib.org for more programs and resources.